What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react to some Canadian insider information. So, we know that Canada and the United States, we're gonna sort of ramp up our trade negotiations pretty soon, hopefully, with the whole Kuzma trade agreement coming under renewal. So there's going to be negotiations with that coming up. And, you know, honestly, I think that a lot of Americans really assume that we are the ones negotiating from a position of power. And, that's the way that we like doing things. And we're also totally fine with making crazy threats as well, apparently. But, according to this video here, it actually says that Canada has a lot of leverage over the United States, which I don't think we realize at all. So today, I really want to check this out and learn about what Canada has up their sleeve, I guess. So let's take a look.
Canada-U.S. trade talks are expected to heat up in the next couple of months ahead of the mandatory Kuzma review. And while President Donald Trump has repeatedly said that the U.S. doesn't need Canada, some experts disagree.
I mean, you can't make it up. What an incredible pioneer. What an amazing trade policy just for our president to say, we don't need this country. We don't need that ally. We don't need Canada, one of our greatest and longest and most important, most interconnected trading partners. We don't need that. Wow. Round of applause. That is just brilliant. Just amazing stuff. Okay.
The CBC's Mike Crawley is working on the story for us and joins us from Washington. Mike, I read your piece that's online with much interest, so let's talk a little bit about it. What kind of leverage does Canada have going into these talks?
Oh. Yeah, Andrew, I've been looking at this question for a few weeks now, actually, because I kept hearing and reading about how much power the U.S. has in this relationship, how hard it's going to be, for Canada to make any progress in getting tariffs lifted or get the kind of a trade deal that's actually going to be good for Canada.
That has certainly been the stance of the United States, certainly Trump and his administration, and probably a lot of Americans, to be honest. Maybe it's an egotistical thing. I mean, it's also just factual that the United States, we've been pretty successful and we give a lot of benefit to other countries. But the truth is, the only reason we have been as successful as we have been is because of all of our allies and other trading partners and other countries that are willing to do business with us and give us money and invest in us and trade with us. That's how it's all been possible for our success. So I really think that mindset of oh yeah, the United States, we're the best and we should be able to have any negotiation however we want it for any reason, and we will shun you if you do not agree. That, just talk about disrespectful and infuriating, but also just wrong and bad strategy for us as well. So
this is all because supposedly the U.S. has so much more leverage than Canada does in this relationship because our economy is far more dependent on the U.S.
That's an argument I've heard. Literally, the U.S. economy is bigger. We have more people, more wealth, and therefore more influence. But we also import way more of our stuff from Canada than you guys import from us, right? That's Trump has been very vocally upset that we have a trade deficit with Canada. We we import way more from Canada than you guys from us. And he views that as like taking advantage of us. Well, no matter how you view it, clearly, like we depend upon Canada for a lot of stuff. And I know like energy, like oil pipelines and a lot of stuff, right? So yeah, I just on its face value, I can already think of ways that like Canada definitely has some leverage on us. Yeah, for sure.
On exports to the U.S., then the U.S. economy is dependent on exports to Canada. But I got talking to quite a number of people who have some insight into how trade negotiations work, and there's a pretty broad consensus among them that actually Canada has quite a few points of leverage in these talks.
Okay. I mean, I kind of joked that this was like insider information. Um, Obviously, this is like public Canadian news that I'm watching on YouTube, so it's obviously not a secret, but at the same time, I really think because of like the ego, I think that's a good way of putting it. Like just the ego of the US has blinded us into not realizing like that Canada has these points of negotiation or leverage, and I do want to hear what they are.
If Ottawa chooses to use them. One of the people that I spoke with is Brian Clow. He was in charge of the whole Canada-US relations file for then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So that makes him one of only really a handful of people in Canada who've actually been in the room negotiating with folks from the Trump administration.
Oh God, I can only imagine what that must be like. I would love to see what that's like. Like actually being in the room, whatever the room is, that they're like pulling out their laptops or whatever, their sticky notes and like doing trade deals. Like that's such a broad statement. Like what actually happens in there? And we're talking about the Trump administration that you're trying to like do business with, and like it's probably like pretty chaotic at this point, I would imagine, but interesting.
And he told me that, from what he's observed over the years, that when the president or his officials react the most negatively to something that Canada does, when they're the most aggressive in their rhetoric, that is a tell. That is an indication that this is an issue that really matters to them, and that's when Canada has leverage.
Well, that's fascinating. And it's kind of bizarre as an American myself, like hearing like oh, these are the tells that American government representatives give off, like you're reading into us and exploiting that. But it's also at the same time like really important to know your own weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and the stuff that the US gets the most mad at and is the most vocal about is the stuff that matters the most. That makes sense. It's the stuff that could hurt us the most. Like Trump had a very, very big reaction to Canada doing some new trade negotiations with China. Like Trump basically tweeted a threat saying, don't you dare talk to China. Don't you dare talk to this or that. Don't you dare lower your independence or your reliance. Don't you dare try to distance yourself from the US. Because I think, quite frankly, the United States probably loves having other countries as dependent on us as possible. That's just frankly smart from our point of view. Like, it's good to have other people depend on you for stuff. Like, that's good because it's probably worth a lot of money and stuff and influence. So that's one example of when Trump or the US government got upset at Canada. So those are the things we should pay attention to.
Most recent example that he pointed to on this, the agreement that Prime Minister Mark Carney struck with Beijing to reduce tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles in exchange for a reduction in tariffs on Canadian.
Put me on the news. Put me up there. I could do this. Exactly. That's exactly right. And this guy did weeks of research too. I'm just joking. I think this guy probably knows a lot more about this stuff than I do, but it just goes to show you, like, just by paying attention, using common sense, and evaluating what's going on, like, you can figure this out, despite like the U.S. government seemingly having such low competence and understanding of trade relationships. It's not rocket science. Like, you just got to be like reasonable. And anyway,
Canadian canola products. Take a listen to this.
What it ultimately says to the Americans is, if you keep treating us badly, if you keep slapping tariffs on our key sectors like steel, aluminum, cars, lumber, if you refuse to renew the CUSMA deal, you're going to push Canada into the arms of countries you don't like. And that's where the leverage and power comes from.
absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. And it's a good message. Like, none of it is good for the US, so it's always kind of like weird for me to try to be objective about this. But it is very smart for Canada to be doing what you have been doing, and Mark Carney, and trying to strike up relationships with other countries to lower your dependence upon the US, and it's also sending a message. That's the other intangible part of it. It's all of that sends a message. Donald Trump is paying attention. As much as he wants to act like he doesn't care and, oh, we don't need Canada, that's how you know it's all like an act. It's a song and dance. It's smoke and mirrors. It's not true. We do, and Trump knows that. Deep down in his core, I think.
So in essence here, Andrew, the idea is that EV deal with China creates kind of a bargaining chip, right? The same goes for access to critical minerals that Canada has and that the U.S. really, really wants.
Yeah.
There's also the huge amount of foreign investment, mostly from Canadian pension funds, down here in the U.S. It's upwards of $1 trillion Canadian dollars.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know about that. That's the kind of like financial stuff that's in the weeds that I don't think anyone really thinks about unless you're in the industry. Like investment funds, Canadian investment funds, like literally investing in different U.S. Companies, stocks, whatever, our funds, whatever it might be. Like a trillion Canadian dollars? That's no joke. That's a lot, even by any metric. Like, anywhere close to $1 trillion, Canadian or US, whatever, that's enough to shift the tides of any country anywhere. That's really significant.
In assets that Canadian funds have invested in the U.S., and those are just a few of the points of leverage from the list that I compiled.
Wow, $1 trillion. That's about half the size of the overall Canadian economy, just to give perspective of how much money that is. Energy prices, the GDP, energy prices are top of mind these days, especially because of the war in the Middle East right now. So how might Canada's energy markets play a role in future trade with the U.S.?
Yeah, no, clearly when it comes to leverage, it's crude oil is the biggie here.
For the longest time, I had no idea that we got a lot of crude oil from Canada. I didn't know that. Now I've seen like a couple of videos explaining all that, and it's like, oh my God, there's like a huge network between Canada and the US with oil, and we are so dependent upon you for that. I think a lot of Americans really have no idea about that.
The U.S. imports more crude oil from Canada than it does from all other countries in the world combined, right?
I feel like I'm not alone. Like, I'm not the only American who had no clue we get so much energy from Canada. That's huge. Like, it's actually astonishing that Canada, you have shown the restraint that you have. It's kind of like some moron coming up and trying to pick a fight with you, and you're secretly like a black belt in karate and jujitsu, and you have a giant sword on your back and a assault rifle, and they're like coming up and like kicking you in the shin, like and you're just like showing this restraint, like you're not using all these points of leverage and really weapons you could against the US. Like we are so reliant in so many ways that we don't even acknowledge. And Canada has not really like used that against us. Like you haven't like cut off the oil to us, or I think a while back like you wanted to cut off electricity to some of the northern states or something. Now I understand how significant that is.
So I'm told that Canadian negotiators are basically trying to see what is a way that they can, leverage that resource, given all the uncertainty that we've got right now around rising prices, around U.S. access to oil from around the world,
And it also is crazy because if our roles were reversed, like if we had all the oil and Canada depended upon that, that Trump would have used that as a threat by now. Excuse me. It's getting me worked up. But the sneeze, I think, verifies, like, that's how you know it's the truth. I don't know why that verifies anything, but that's what I'm going with. If we had all these leverage and points of things that Canada relied on from us, like oil, Trump would have shut off the oil and threatened you and said, absolutely. So the fact that Canada hasn't done that to us thus far shows a lot of character and restraint, quite honestly.
if so, what would the U.S. concede in return? So it's one part here, Andrew, of how the timing of these talks could be somewhat advantageous to Canada, right? You've got the rising cost of living as a major political issue down here in the U.S. You've got more and more Americans coming to the realization that tariffs drive up the cost of living for them. And as
Oh my God. Don't even get me started on the tariffs. What a complete and utter fail of the most epic proportions. The tariffs. Yeah, and they were like literally ruled illegal. There might be like billions of dollars in tariff refunds because everyone is suing the US government for illegally collecting these tariffs. And it caused inflation, and it hurt the US, and it hurt Canada, and that should go down as one of the biggest fails in history. Seriously.
As the midterm elections get closer and you've got more and more Republicans in Congress sort of worried about whether they're going to be able to retain their seats or whether they're going to be able to retain control of Congress, that might just give Canadians a little bit more leverage in negotiating some kind of a deal that works.
Sure, that's an interesting thought. Like purely from a selfish point of view, like feeding into the selfishness of American politicians. Like American politicians, especially like conservative ones that might feel a little nervous right now, want to be reelected. And to get reelected, generally things have to be good for American citizens to keep the status quo, keep voting for what we're voting for. It has to be working and life has to be good. So if Canada has a way to make life good in the US and make conservative Republican politicians look good for elections, that's leverage.
So just to follow your thought, Mike, just as a final point on this, we heard from the U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer sort of saying talks with Mexico are moving along nicely. They're not moving along as quickly as with Canada, sort of implying that we're difficult.
Oh my God. So insane. Not the first time I've heard that, too. That Canada is so difficult. Why are you so difficult? Guys, come on. Just let us tariff you. Let us try to take you over. Just let us do whatever we want to you. Rely on us for everything. Come on. Why are you being so difficult? Just let us do whatever we want. Whenever we want. Look, that's literally the attitude that it's insane.
But that actually could be a sign, could be a good sign. It sounds counterintuitive, but that seems to be the implication that, for instance, the former staffer you were speaking to says.
Yeah, the expression "keeping your powder dry." There's been some indication that the Canadians have been unwilling to move forward and do some of the things that the Americans have wanted over recent months. Critical minerals is one example. So last month there was it kind of a bit flew under the radar. There was a meeting that the State Department and Jameson Greer was involved in this as well, had with a bunch of countries from all over the world about critical minerals, and there were agreements signed with the EU and with Japan and with Mexico, but Canada didn't sign on. And people were asking me, I had some contacts in Canada saying, how come Canada wasn't, in on this?
I didn't know about that. Canada really is holding out on this minerals thing. Obviously for like a strategic thing.
And the message that we got from the government was, without saying it directly, they wanted to hold off and basically wait until trade talks were going on. So if they're going to strike any sort of a deal on critical minerals, then that's going to have to come with some sort of a concession from the U.S. What are you going to give us in exchange for that?
That makes complete sense. And that's just good negotiation strategy. It's funny because a lot of Americans, certainly Donald Trump and people, get mad when other countries do what is best for them, which is extremely hypocritical because we are constantly doing things just for the benefit of the US and saying screw all of you, screw everyone else. And then when other countries do that to us, we get so mad.
Interesting. Mike, good to talk to you. Thank you. The CBC's Mike Crawley, live in Washington.
That was really interesting. That was really good. And this guy, that's awesome that he studied this and had all this really cool inside information. And it's definitely a perspective that Americans like myself and most Americans never hear about, don't think about. And that, yeah. And this is so important. So important. So I'm glad to have learned about this. I didn't know that Canada had all this stuff up your sleeve. Maybe you're playing us like a fiddle or something. I don't know. Or it'll be interesting to see what happens, especially with negotiations for the Kuzma thing happening soon. And yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. I didn't know about all this. Maybe Canada has the upper hand in this. I don't know. This is really fascinating. So anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave comments with your thoughts on leverage. Canada might have leverage over the US, a lot of it. That'd be interesting to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canadian things that I've never seen before, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.